Every morning, a small disabled dog named Riley lay in the corner of a bustling animal shelter, unnoticed and unloved. Staff tried their best to help him, but Riley's physical condition scared away every potential adopter. Then one day, a little boy entered the shelter with his parents. What he did next left everyone in tears and changed Riley's life forever. The bustling animal shelter was alive with energy, laughter from children, the excited yips of dogs meeting potential families, and the hum of conversations between staff and visitors. Amidst this vibrant scene, a small dog named Riley sat in a quiet corner. His back legs rested on a tiny wheeled cart, his soulful brown eyes watching the world go by with a quiet, resigned hope. Riley wasn't the type to bark or wag his tail excitedly like the other dogs. He waited patiently, his gaze following each passerby as if asking, could today be the day? But his disability often made people hesitate. Most visitors glanced briefly at his kennel before moving on, their smiles fading into polite sympathy. Behind the scenes, the shelter staff adored Riley. They admired his resilience and gentle demeanor, doing their best to highlight his charm to prospective adopters. He's the sweetest dog you'll ever meet, they'd say, but their words often fell on deaf ears. People wanted the perfect pet, not one with extra challenges. As time passed, Riley's moments of hope grew fewer. He spent most of his days lying in his kennel, observing the bustling shelter around him without much expectation. But that autumn morning was different. The shelter doors swung open, and a family entered. A young boy with tousled brown hair, his parents trailing behind him. The boy's eyes darted around, taking in the lively chaos of the shelter. He passed by playful puppies and wagging tails, his steps slowing as he neared Riley's corner. Unlike the others, he didn't hesitate. He crouched down to meet Riley's gaze through the bars, his face softening with wonder. "Ma," he called, his voice tinged with quiet awe. "He looks like he's waiting for me." His mother approached hesitantly, glancing at Riley's cart, but the boy didn't seem to notice or care. His small hand pressed against the kennel door. "Hi, buddy," he whispered. For the first time in weeks, Riley lifted his head, his tail giving the faintest wag. This wasn't just another family passing by. This was the moment Riley's story truly began. The boy's name was Ethan, an 8-year-old with an undeniable spark of curiosity and compassion in his eyes. As he knelt beside Riley's kennel, his parents stood a few feet away, their expressions a mix of hesitation and concern. "Ethan," his mother, Grace, called gently, "come look at the other dogs. There are so many to choose from." Ethan shook his head, his attention fixed on Riley. "But I like him, Mom. He looks like he needs a friend." Grace exchanged a glance with her husband, Mark, who gave a subtle shrug. "Let him have a moment," Mark murmured. Riley, sensing the boy's sincerity, inched closer to the bars, his tail wagging just a little more now. Ethan's face lit up. "See? He likes me." The shelter worker assigned to Riley, a cheerful young woman named Dana, approached with a warm smile. "You've got a good eye, Ethan. Riley's a special dog. He's been here for a while." "What happened to him?" Ethan asked. His hand still pressed against the kennel door. Dana crouched down to meet his level. "Riley had an accident when he was just a puppy. His back legs don't work, but he's learned to get around just fine with his cart. He's really brave." Ethan looked at Riley with admiration. "He's like a superhero," he said quietly. Grace's brow furrowed as she studied Riley. "Does he need a lot of extra care?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "Well," Dana admitted, "he does need a bit more attention, regular checkups to keep his cart fitted properly, and some help with certain things, like getting upstairs. But he's very independent, and he's got the sweetest personality. He just needs someone to give him a chance." Ethan turned to his parents, his eyes wide and hopeful. "Can we take him home? Please?" Mark hesitated, scratching the back of his neck. "It's a big responsibility, Ethan. Taking care of any dog is hard work, but Riley might need even more from us." Ethan nodded solemnly. "I'll help, I promise. I'll do everything I can." Grace knelt beside her son, resting a hand on his shoulder. "Ethan, are you sure? There are lots of other dogs here, healthy ones, young ones, but they already have people who want them," Ethan replied, his voice steady. "Riley doesn't. He needs me." For a moment, there was silence, broken only by Riley's soft whine. Mark looked at Grace and then at Dana. "Could we spend some time with him?" he asked. Dana's face brightened. "Of course. Let me bring him out to the play area." Minutes later, Riley was carefully wheeled into the outdoor space where Ethan was already waiting, holding a tennis ball. Riley's tail wagged furiously as Dana unlatched the kennel door, and he eagerly rolled toward the boy. "Hi, Riley," Ethan said softly, holding out the ball. Riley sniffed it, then nudged it back toward him with his nose. Ethan laughed. "He's so smart." The two played together for what felt like hours, Ethan running around the yard while Riley zipped after him in his cart, barking happily. Even Grace and Mark couldn't help but smile as they watched the bond form between their son and this little dog who had been overlooked by so many. Grace turned to Dana, her voice quiet. "He really does seem special." Dana nodded. "Riley's been through a lot, but he hasn't let it break his spirit. Dogs like him, they don't just need a home, they change the lives of the people who take them in." Mark rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "We'll need to make some adjustments at home. Ramps for the stairs, maybe a new schedule to make sure he gets everything he needs." Grace smiled, her eyes softening. "But it might be worth it." Nearby, Ethan knelt beside Riley, gently stroking his fur. "You're not alone anymore," he whispered. For the first time in a long while, Riley looked truly content, his brown eyes reflecting the trust he was beginning to feel. It was as if he understood that this family might just be his second chance. Ethan's parents finally made the decision. Riley would become part of their family. As the adoption papers were signed and Riley was loaded into their car, the shelter staff gathered to say their goodbyes, some with tears in their eyes. Dana knelt down one last time, rubbing Riley's head. "You're going to have a great life, buddy," she said softly. The drive home was filled with Ethan's excited chatter. "We'll play every day, Riley. You'll sleep in my room, and I'll make sure you're the happiest dog ever." Mark smiled in the rearview mirror, watching his son and the dog in the back seat. "You've got a big heart, kiddo," he said. "But remember, Riley's going to need extra care." "I know, Dad," Ethan said confidently. "We'll figure it out." When they arrived home, Grace led Riley to the backyard. It was large and grassy, a perfect space for a dog to explore. Riley eagerly wheeled himself around, sniffing every corner, his tail wagging non-stop. The first few days went smoother than anyone had expected. Ethan was a devoted caretaker, helping Riley with his cart and ensuring he was comfortable. Grace and Mark marveled at their son's determination, but it wasn't long before they encountered their first hurdle. One evening, as Ethan and Riley were playing in the yard, Riley suddenly stopped. His cart had gotten stuck in a patch of uneven ground. Ethan tried to free him, but Riley let out a sharp yelp. Panicked, Ethan called for his parents. Mark rushed out, carefully lifting Riley out of his cart and inspecting him. "I think he's fine, but we should be careful. He could have hurt himself." Ethan nodded, tears brimming in his eyes. "I didn't mean to hurt him. I thought he could handle it." Grace hugged her son tightly. "It's okay, Ethan. You didn't know. This is a learning process for all of us." The incident was a wake-up call. Riley's disability meant there were limits to what he could do safely. Mark and Grace sat down with Ethan that night to discuss how they could better support Riley. "We need to make some changes," Mark said. "Maybe we can level the backyard or add ramps. And we should take Riley to the vet for a checkup to make sure he's okay." Ethan listened intently, nodding. "I'll do whatever it takes. Riley deserves the best." The next day, they visited the vet, who confirmed that Riley hadn't suffered any injuries from the incident, but recommended physical therapy to help him build strength and adapt to his cart better. The vet also mentioned a local support group for families with disabled pets, suggesting it might be helpful for them. Grace looked at the pamphlet the vet handed her, intrigued. "This could be good for us, Ethan. We could learn from other families who've been through this." Ethan wasn't sure at first. "Do you think Riley will like it?" Grace smiled. "I think it'll be good for both of you." Later that week, they attended their first support group meeting at a community park. To Ethan's surprise, there were many other families with dogs just like Riley, each with their own unique challenges and stories. Riley seemed to fit right in, wheeling around and sniffing at the other dogs, his tail wagging happily. One family caught Ethan's attention in particular, a girl named Mia and her dog, Cooper, who had lost a leg. Mia, about Ethan's age, shared how she had worked hard to make Cooper feel like a regular dog, despite his disability. "Cooper taught me something," Mia said to Ethan. Dogs don't see themselves as broken. They just want to be loved. Ethan nodded thoughtfully, watching Riley interact with Cooper. That's what I want for Riley, he said. For him to feel happy, no matter what. The support group not only gave the family practical advice, but also strengthened their resolve. Ethan returned home more determined than ever to make life better for Riley. They got to work right away, leveling the backyard, adding ramps around the house, and even setting up a small obstacle course for Riley to keep him active. Ethan spent hours training Riley to navigate the course, cheering him on every step of the way. But it wasn't just Riley who was changing. The family began to notice a transformation in Ethan too. He was more patient, more empathetic, and more resilient. It was as if caring for Riley was teaching him lessons no classroom ever could. As Riley's confidence grew, so did Ethan's. Together they were overcoming challenges, proving that love and determination could make anything possible. The adjustments to life with Riley were both rewarding and challenging. Every day brought something new, and Ethan, along with his parents, learned to adapt. While Riley was thriving in his new environment, the family had to balance their own routines to accommodate his needs. One of the first adjustments was creating a schedule. Grace, always organized, suggested dividing responsibilities. Ethan, you'll handle Riley's feeding and playtime after school. Mark and I will manage his therapy and vet appointments. Ethan nodded eagerly. I'll do my best, Mum. Mornings started early, with Ethan waking up to prepare Riley's breakfast. He carefully measured out Riley's food and helped him into his cart, ensuring it was secure. As Riley wagged his tail, Ethan smiled. You're ready for the day, buddy. Riley had started weekly physical therapy sessions, which quickly became a family event. At the therapy center, Riley practiced using his cart on different terrains, guided by a gentle and patient therapist named Laura. She explained to Ethan, Riley's muscles need to stay strong, especially his front legs. He's doing great, but consistency is key. Ethan watched intently, occasionally stepping in to encourage Riley. You've got this, Riley. One paw at a time. Mark and Grace observed their son closely during these sessions. Mark leaned over to Grace one day, whispering, Have you noticed how much Ethan has grown through this? He's so responsible now. Grace smiled, her eyes welling up. Riley's brought out the best in him. Back home, the changes were evident in the physical environment too. The ramps installed around the house made it easier for Riley to move freely. Ethan loved racing Riley up and down the ramps, cheering when Riley's cart sped across the smooth wood. One evening, as Ethan was helping Riley navigate the obstacle course in the backyard, a neighbor, Mr. Thompson, leaned over the fence. Ethan, you've done wonders with that dog. I wasn't sure how you'd manage, but it's clear Riley's in the right hands. Ethan beamed. Thanks, Mr. Thompson. Riley's the best. He's teaching me a lot too, but not every day was smooth. One rainy afternoon, Riley slipped while trying to navigate a wet patch in the yard. He let out a startled yelp, and Ethan rushed over, his heart pounding. Kneeling beside Riley, he carefully checked him over. You're okay, buddy, Ethan murmured, his voice shaking. I'll be more careful next time. Mark joined them, gently lifting Riley and carrying him inside. Ethan, these things happen. It's all part of learning. Ethan nodded, his face set with determination. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again. The incident prompted another adjustment, creating a safer outdoor play area. The family decided to cover part of the yard with a soft, non-slip surface. Ethan helped lay it down, working alongside Mark late into the evening. When they finished, Riley cautiously tested it, wagging his tail with approval. Amid the challenges, moments of joy became the norm. Riley's personality blossomed, and his playful nature was infectious. He loved chasing balls Ethan rolled toward him, barking excitedly when he managed to grab one. Grace often joined in, clapping her hands and laughing. How you're faster than I expected, Riley. Even Mark, who initially worried about the extra responsibility, found himself bonding with Riley. One evening, Ethan caught him sitting on the couch, Riley curled up beside him. You've got a good dog here, Mark said, scratching Riley behind the ears. He's special. Ethan grinned. He's family. The support group also became a regular part of their lives. At each meeting, Ethan eagerly shared Riley's progress, while Mia and her dog Cooper continued to inspire him. Mia once said, Riley's lucky to have you. Not everyone would go this far for a dog. Ethan shook his head. It's not about going far. It's about doing what's right. One of the most transformative moments came during a community event hosted by the support group. Families were encouraged to share their stories, and Ethan volunteered to speak. Standing on a small stage with Riley by his side, Ethan said, "Riley came into my life when he needed someone most, but I didn't realize I needed him too. He's taught me that love isn't about what you can do perfectly. It's about trying no matter what." The audience erupted into applause, some wiping away tears. Grace and Mark watched proudly as Ethan hugged Riley, who barked happily, wagging his tail. By the end of the night, several people approached Ethan, thanking him for his words. One woman said, "Your story reminds me that every life has value, no matter the challenges." Ethan smiled, glancing at Riley. "He's the one who taught me that." As the weeks went by, the family settled into a rhythm. The initial challenges of caring for Riley became opportunities for growth and bonding. Together, they were creating a life where Riley wasn't just a disabled dog, he was a beloved member of the family. As the family grew closer, their bond with Riley deepened. However, life with a disabled dog wasn't without new challenges. One of the first issues arose when a neighborhood event was announced, a pet parade and talent show. The event was meant to celebrate pets of all kinds, and Ethan was eager to participate with Riley. "Riley can show everyone how amazing he is," Ethan exclaimed one evening at dinner. "We can showcase his obstacle course skills." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure, Ethan? It's a big event. Riley might get overwhelmed." Ethan's enthusiasm didn't waver. "We'll practice every day. Riley will love it. I know he will." Grace smiled, though she shared Mark's concerns. "If you're determined, Ethan, we'll support you. Just remember, Riley's comfort comes first." Ethan nodded eagerly, already imagining Riley impressing the crowd. But as the parade day approached, Ethan realized the magnitude of the challenge. Practicing at home was one thing, but a noisy public event was entirely different. On the morning of the event, the family arrived early to find the park bustling with activity. Booths lined the pathways, music played from loudspeakers, and dozens of pets with their owners milled around. Riley, seated in his cart, looked around curiously, but soon tucked his tail and lowered his head. Ethan knelt beside him, gently stroking his fur. "It's okay, Riley. I'm right here." Mark leaned over. "Maybe we should skip the talent show, Ethan. Riley looks nervous." Ethan bit his lip, glancing between his dad and Riley. "Let's just try. If he doesn't want to, we'll stop." The parade began, and Riley trotted beside Ethan, his cart rolling steadily. The crowd's cheers seemed to energize him at first, but as they neared the performance area for the talent show, Riley froze. His ears pinned back, and he whimpered softly. Ethan crouched down, his heart sinking. "Riley, it's okay. We don't have to do this." The announcer called their names, Ethan and Riley, the remarkable rescue team. Ethan turned to his parents. Defeated. "He's scared." "I don't want to force him." Grace knelt beside Ethan. "It's okay, sweetie. You're doing the right thing by putting Riley first." Just as they were about to leave, Mia appeared with Cooper. "Ethan, don't give up yet," she said. "Let Riley see Cooper perform. Sometimes seeing another dog can help." Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, let's try." Cooper took the stage and performed a series of tricks, his missing leg barely a hindrance. The crowd clapped and cheered, and Riley perked up slightly, his ears twitching. Ethan saw the change and whispered, "Do you want to give it a shot, Riley?" Riley licked Ethan's hand, his tail wagging just a little. Ethan grinned. "All right, buddy. Let's show them what you've got." On stage, Ethan guided Riley through the obstacle course they had practiced so many times at home. At first, Riley moved hesitantly, but as the crowd cheered, he gained confidence. By the time he reached the final ramp, Riley was wagging his tail excitedly. Ethan raised his arms in victory, and the crowd erupted into applause. After their performance, people approached Ethan and Riley, praising their bond and determination. One woman said, "You've shown everyone that disabilities don't define who we are. Riley is amazing." Ethan beamed, petting Riley. "He's taught me more than I could ever teach him." Despite the success of the parade, life continued to present challenges. A few weeks later, a more serious issue arose. Riley began to show signs of discomfort in his front legs, which bore most of his weight due to his cart. Concerned, the family took him to the vet. Dr. Patel examined Riley carefully. His front legs are under a lot of strain, she explained. We can try a different cart design that distributes the weight better, but he'll need some rest and maybe additional therapy. Ethan looked worried. Will he be okay, doctor? Patel, with the right adjustments and care, he should be, she assured them. But you'll need to monitor him closely. The news weighed heavily on Ethan. He spent hours researching better carts and therapy techniques, determined to help Riley feel better. Mark and Grace admired their son's dedication, but they also worried about the emotional toll it was taking on him. One evening, Mark sat down with Ethan. You're doing an incredible job, son. But remember, it's okay to ask for help. Riley's part of our family, and we're all here for him and for you. Ethan nodded, his voice quiet. I just want him to be happy, Dad. He already is, Mark said, smiling. And that's because of you. With his parents' support, Ethan redoubled his efforts. They ordered a custom cart designed to reduce strain on Riley's legs and incorporated new exercises into his therapy sessions. Riley's improvement was gradual, but Ethan's determination never wavered. The challenges they faced only strengthened their bond, teaching Ethan and his family that love wasn't about perfection. It was about persistence, compassion, and teamwork. As Riley adjusted to his new cart and therapy routine, the family found themselves navigating a deeper emotional journey. Riley's progress was slow, and while Ethan remained optimistic, there were moments when his resolve wavered. He started to question whether he was doing enough for Riley. One rainy afternoon, Ethan sat on the floor of the living room, brushing Riley's fur. Riley leaned into the touch. His eyes closed contentedly, but Ethan's mind was elsewhere. Why is it taking so long? Ethan muttered to himself, his frustration bubbling to the surface. I thought the new cart would fix everything. Grace, hearing the tone in her son's voice, put down her book and joined him on the floor. Ethan, she said gently, Riley isn't just about getting fixed. He's about love and patience. You've done so much for him already. Ethan looked at his mom, his eyes filled with worry. But what if it's not enough? What if he's still in pain and I can't do anything about it? Grace placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. You've already changed his life, Ethan. He's happy because of you. Healing isn't always fast or easy, but it's worth it. Riley stirred, nuzzling Ethan's hand as if sensing his unease. Ethan smiled faintly, scratching Riley behind the ears. Thanks, buddy, he whispered. I'll keep trying. Later that week, another test of their bond came when Ethan took Riley back to the park for a follow-up therapy session. The park was bustling with activity, and several children were playing nearby. As Riley practiced navigating small ramps and weaving through cones, a group of kids stopped to watch. Look at that dog, one boy exclaimed, pointing at Riley. What's wrong with his legs? Ethan felt a twinge of discomfort, but smiled politely. His back legs don't work, so he uses a cart to get around. Why would anyone want a dog like that? Another boy asked, his voice dripping with curiosity. Before Ethan could respond, a girl from the group spoke up. Because he's amazing, that's why. She walked over to Riley, her movements calm and deliberate. Hi, Riley, she said softly, kneeling to pet him. Riley wagged his tail and licked her hand. Ethan's chest swelled with pride. He is amazing, he said, smiling at the girl. He's stronger than most people realize. The girl looked up at Ethan. You're lucky to have him. Ethan nodded. I really am. After the encounter, Ethan reflected on how others perceived Riley. He realized that while some people saw limitations, others saw resilience and beauty. It gave him a renewed sense of purpose, reminding him why he had fought so hard for Riley. But the challenges didn't end there. One evening, as the family prepared for bed, Riley began to whine softly. Ethan rushed to his side, noticing that Riley was struggling to move his front legs. Mom, Dad, something's wrong with Riley, Ethan called out, panic in his voice. Mark and Grace hurried over, their faces filled with concern. Let's get him to Dr. Patel, Mark said, grabbing his car keys. At the veterinary clinic, Dr. Patel examined Riley thoroughly. It seems like he's overexerted his front legs, she said. We'll need to adjust his therapy and give him more rest. It's not uncommon for dogs in carts to face this kind of strain. Ethan sat beside Riley, stroking his fur. I thought I was helping him, he said quietly, but maybe I pushed him too hard. Dr. Patel gave Ethan a kind smile. Ethan, you're doing everything right. Riley's progress is a journey, not a sprint. He's lucky to have someone who cares so much. On the drive home, Ethan sat silently in the back seat with Riley, his thoughts racing. He couldn't shake the guilt of feeling responsible for Riley's discomfort, but as Riley rested his head on Ethan's lap, he felt a wave of reassurance. "You're not giving up, are you?" Ethan whispered. Riley's tail wagged faintly in response, as if to say, "Never." The following days were a turning point for Ethan. He realized that Riley's journey wasn't just about physical recovery, it was about adapting, finding joy in the small victories, and cherishing their bond. Ethan began to approach Riley's care with a renewed perspective, focusing not just on progress, but on the happiness they shared. Ethan also noticed a shift in himself. He became more patient, more attuned to Riley's needs, and more determined to celebrate every little triumph. When Riley successfully climbed a small ramp during therapy, Ethan cheered louder than anyone, drawing smiles from onlookers. "You've got this, Riley," Ethan said, his voice filled with pride. Each challenge they faced only strengthened their bond, teaching Ethan that true love wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, no matter how hard things got. And in Riley's unwavering spirit, Ethan found a reflection of his own resilience. Ethan and Riley had found a rhythm in their new life together. Therapy sessions became more fluid, daily walks with the cart were easier, and Riley's joyful spirit began to shine brighter than ever. But just as everything seemed to be falling into place, a new challenge emerged, one that neither Ethan nor his family had anticipated. One sunny afternoon, the family was at the park for a community pet event. Dogs of all shapes and sizes were running, jumping and wagging their tails. Ethan proudly showcased Riley's cart, answering questions from curious passers-by about how it worked. Riley was a hit. His determination and cheerfulness captured everyone's hearts. Amidst the crowd, a middle-aged man with a clipboard approached Ethan. He wore a neatly pressed shirt with the logo of a regional animal rescue organization embroidered on it. "Hi there," the man said, extending his hand. "I'm Robert from Midwest Animal Heroes. I've been following Riley's story online. You're Ethan, right?" Ethan nodded, shaking his hand. "Yeah, that's me. It's nice to meet you." Robert crouched to pet Riley, who licked his hand enthusiastically. "He's such an inspiration," Robert said, his voice filled with admiration. "I work with animals with disabilities, and I've never seen such a happy, well-adjusted pup. You've done an amazing job," Ethan beamed, but Robert's expression turned more serious. "That's why I wanted to talk to you about something. Have you ever thought about expanding Riley's story? Maybe helping other dogs in similar situations?" Ethan tilted his head. Curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" Robert stood and gestured to a nearby booth adorned with photos of disabled dogs who had been adopted through his organization. "We're always looking for ambassadors to help spread awareness. Riley could be the face of hope for so many animals." The idea thrilled Ethan, but there was a catch. Robert explained that being an ambassador would involve traveling to events, participating in media appearances, and even visiting shelters to inspire adoptions. "It's a big commitment," Robert said, handing Ethan a brochure, "but I think you and Riley would be perfect for it." That evening, as the family gathered around the dinner table, Ethan shared the proposal. "Riley could help other dogs like him find homes," Ethan said excitedly, passing the brochure to his parents. Mark read it carefully. "It sounds amazing, Ethan, but it also sounds like a lot of work. Are you sure you're ready for this?" Ethan hesitated. "I think so. But it says, what if Riley gets overwhelmed? Or what if it's too much for me?" Grace leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "It's a wonderful opportunity, but you need to think about what's best for Riley too. He's happy now, but will all this attention change that?" Over the next few days, Ethan couldn't stop thinking about Robert's offer. He imagined Riley inspiring other families to adopt disabled dogs, but he also worried about taking on such a big responsibility. Riley had already been through so much. Was it fair to ask more of him? The turning point came during a particularly moving therapy session. Ethan noticed a young girl sitting on a bench nearby, clutching a stuffed animal in her lap. She seemed hesitant, her eyes fixed on Riley as he practiced climbing a ramp. After the session, Ethan approached her. "Hi," he said gently. "Do you want to meet Riley?" The girl nodded shyly, and Ethan led Riley over. She hesitated for a moment before reaching out to pet him. Riley wagged his tail and leaned into her touch, his usual warmth breaking through her initial reserve. "What's his name?" she asked softly. Riley, Ethan said, smiling. He's my best friend. The girl looked up at Ethan, her eyes glistening. My dog passed away a few months ago. He was my best friend, too. Ethan felt a pang of empathy. I'm so sorry, he said. Dogs are special like that, aren't they? They have a way of making everything better. The girl nodded, her smile faint but genuine. Riley's really lucky to have you. As Ethan watched the girl walk away, he realized that Riley's story was already making a difference, even in small, unexpected ways. Maybe Robert was right. Maybe Riley could inspire others, not just through events or appearances, but by showing people what resilience and love looked like. That night, Ethan sat by Riley's side, running his fingers through the dog's fur. What do you think, buddy? He asked. Could we do it? Could we help other dogs like you? Riley wagged his tail and licked Ethan's hand, his answer clear. The decision to move forward with Robert's proposal didn't come easily, but once Ethan resolved to accept it, a new chapter in Riley's life began. The duo was invited to their first event, a local adoption fair. The fair was bustling with people of all ages, and Riley, with his infectious enthusiasm and wagging tail, was the star of the show. Ethan prepared for the day meticulously. He printed a small booklet about Riley's journey, including photos of his transformation, and a heartfelt letter about how much Riley had changed Ethan's life. The family arrived early, setting up a table adorned with posters, pamphlets, and Riley's favorite toys. A banner overhead read, "Meet Riley, a story of resilience and hope." As the fair began, visitors flocked to their booth. Ethan was ready with his practiced speech, but it quickly became apparent that Riley's charm needed no introduction. Children knelt beside him, adults asked questions, and several people inquired about adopting other dogs from the shelter Riley had come from. Midway through the day, Ethan spotted a young couple standing off to the side, looking hesitant. The woman held a baby in her arms, while the man glanced nervously at the dogs nearby. Sensing their uncertainty, Ethan approached them with Riley trotting at his side. "Hi there," Ethan said with a friendly smile. "This is Riley. Would you like to meet him?" The couple exchanged glances before stepping closer. "We're thinking about adopting," the man admitted, "but we're worried. We have a baby, and we're not sure how a dog would fit into our lives." Ethan nodded, understanding their concern. "It can be a big adjustment," he said, "but Riley has shown me that dogs have a way of bringing out the best in people. He's been through so much, but his love and loyalty have been constant. Maybe a dog like him could teach your family the same thing." The woman crouched down, holding her baby securely, as Riley leaned in to sniff the child's tiny hand. The baby giggled, and the woman's expression softened. "He's amazing," she whispered. By the end of the fair, the couple had signed adoption papers for a three-legged dog named Milo. As they thanked Ethan and Riley, the man said, "You're doing something incredible here. Thank you for helping us see what's possible." The moment filled Ethan with pride, but the day wasn't without its challenges. As the event wound down, a group of teenagers approached, their laughter tinged with mockery. They pointed at Riley's cart, whispering to each other. Ethan bristled but tried to maintain his composure. "What happened to your dog?" one of them sneered, his tone more cruel than curious. Ethan stood tall, placing a protective hand on Riley's back. "Riley was born different, but he's stronger than most dogs. And people, I know. He doesn't let anything stop him, and that's more than I can say for some." The group shuffled uncomfortably before slinking away, and a few nearby spectators clapped softly, offering Ethan nods of support. Though the encounter left him shaken, it reinforced his resolve. Riley's story wasn't just about hope. It was about standing up to ignorance and showing the world that every life, no matter how imperfect, had value. As they packed up to leave, Robert approached, his expression a mix of pride and encouragement. "You handled that beautifully," he said. "Moments like these are what make a difference. You and Riley are changing minds, one person at a time." Back at home, Ethan reflected on the day with his family. "It was amazing," he said, stroking Riley's fur as the dog lay curled up beside him. "But it's also hard. Not everyone sees Riley the way we do." Grace placed a comforting hand on her son's shoulder. "That's why what you're doing is so important," she said. "Not everyone will understand, but for the ones who do, you're creating something meaningful." Over the next few weeks, Ethan and Riley attended more events, their story gaining traction both locally and online. They visited schools to talk about acceptance and resilience, met with families considering adoption, and even inspired a local pet supply store to donate resources to the shelter. But as their schedule grew busier, Ethan began to notice signs of fatigue in Riley. The dog, while eager to please, started to lag behind during walks and seemed less energetic at events. One evening, as Ethan brushed Riley's coat, he noticed the dog's breathing was heavier than usual. "Are you okay, buddy?" Ethan asked, concern etched on his face. Mark suggested a visit to the vet. The checkup revealed that Riley was healthy, but needed more rest between activities. "He's doing a lot," the vet explained. "He's happy, but make sure he has time to recover. He's been through more than most." Ethan took the advice to heart, scaling back their commitments to ensure Riley's well-being came first. The adjustment was difficult, but necessary, and Ethan learned to balance his drive to help others with his responsibility to care for Riley. Through it all, one thing remained constant. The bond between Ethan and Riley deepened. Each small victory, every life they touched, became a testament to their journey together. And as Riley drifted to sleep that night, his head resting on Ethan's lap, Ethan whispered, "We're doing this for you, buddy, for everything you've given me." As Ethan and Riley continued their journey of advocacy and inspiration, the duo became local celebrities. Their story resonated far beyond their small town, garnering attention from regional news outlets and social media platforms. But as their profile grew, so did the pressures and expectations. One morning, Ethan received an email from a national pet organization inviting Riley to be the guest of honor at a high-profile charity gala in the city. The event was set to raise awareness and funds for animal shelters across the country. Ethan's heart leapt with excitement. It was an incredible opportunity to amplify Riley's story. However, it also presented a daunting challenge. The gala was a live event with cameras, an audience, and a lot of unpredictability. At dinner that evening, Ethan shared the news with his family. "This could be huge for Riley and the cause," he said, showing them the invitation. Grace nodded thoughtfully. "It's an honor, Ethan, but it sounds overwhelming, especially for Riley. Are you sure it's the right step?" Mark added. "It's not just about you anymore. Riley's comfort has to come first." Ethan knew they were right. Riley was thriving in their everyday routine, but the gala would be a completely different environment. It was a lot to ask of any dog, let alone one with Riley's unique needs. Still, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was an opportunity they couldn't pass up. Over the next few weeks, Ethan worked tirelessly to prepare for the event. He consulted with trainers, practiced speaking in front of a mirror, and even arranged for a local TV crew to visit their home to document Riley's story as a lead-up to the gala. But as the big day approached, Ethan noticed subtle changes in Riley. The dog seemed restless at night, often shifting uncomfortably in his bed. On walks, he was less enthusiastic, his usual zest subdued. The night before the gala, Ethan sat on the floor beside Riley, gently scratching behind his ears. "Are we doing too much, buddy?" he whispered. Riley thumped his tail softly, leaning into Ethan's hand, but the spark in his eyes wasn't as bright as it used to be. The next day, the family loaded into their car and drove to the city. The gala venue was grand, with glittering chandeliers, red carpets, and an air of sophistication that made Ethan feel out of place. As they entered, Riley drew immediate attention. People gathered around, cooing and snapping pictures, while reporters peppered Ethan with questions. Riley tried to keep up, wagging his tail and greeting everyone with his usual warmth. But Ethan could sense his dog's unease. Midway through the event, Ethan and Riley were ushered onto the stage for their spotlight moment. The lights were blinding, and the applause was deafening. Ethan clutched the microphone, his palms sweaty, as he began to speak. He told the audience about Riley's journey, his resilience, and the importance of giving every animal a chance at life. The words flowed, but his focus kept drifting to Riley, who was panting heavily and shifting uncomfortably by his side. As Ethan wrapped up his speech, he noticed Riley's legs trembling slightly. Panic surged through him. He quickly bent down, scooping Riley into his arms and whispering, "It's okay, buddy. We're almost done." The crowd erupted into applause, assuming the moment was a planned display of affection. But Ethan knew better. Backstage, he set Riley down on a soft blanket and signaled to his parents, who had been watching anxiously from the wings. Grace rushed over, kneeling beside Riley. "He's exhausted," Ethan said, his voice tight with guilt. "I pushed him too far." Mark placed a reassuring hand on Ethan's shoulder. "He'll be okay. He just needs rest." "But Ethan, this is a lesson for both of you." That night, back at the hotel, Ethan stayed awake by Riley's side, tears welling up as he watched his dog sleep. "I've been so focused on what we can do for others," he murmured, "that I forgot to think about what's best for you." The next morning, as Riley perked up slightly, wagging his tail at the sight of his leash, Ethan made a decision. It was time to prioritize Riley's well-being, even if it meant scaling back on their public appearances. The gala had been a success, raising significant funds for animal shelters, but it came at too high a cost for Riley. Ethan's decision to focus on Riley's well-being came with mixed emotions. While he felt relief in knowing he was putting Riley first, he also wrestled with the guilt of possibly letting down the cause they had worked so hard to support. As they returned home, Ethan began rethinking their approach, determined to strike a balance between advocacy and Riley's comfort. The morning after their return, Ethan reached out to Robert, the shelter director, to share his concerns. "I think we need to slow down," Ethan admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "Riley's been amazing, but the gala showed me that we're pushing him too hard. He's been through enough already." Robert listened intently before responding. "Ethan, what you and Riley have done is incredible. But you're right, it's a lot for one dog to carry. Maybe it's time to think about how you can inspire others to take the lead without Riley having to be in the spotlight all the time." Ethan nodded. "But how?" "Riley is the heart of our story," Robert smiled. "He still can be. What if we shift the focus to the message Riley represents? You've already shown people what's possible. Now it's time to empower them to act." Inspired by Robert's words, Ethan brainstormed new ways to advocate for animals without relying solely on Riley's presence. He considered starting a blog to share updates about Riley's life and other rescue animal stories. He also thought about creating educational resources for shelters, schools, and community groups, encouraging them to adopt similar outreach efforts. But before making any big changes, Ethan wanted to test the waters. He reached out to a local elementary school that had previously expressed interest in hosting him and Riley for a talk. This time, he proposed a different format. Instead of Riley attending, Ethan would create a video presentation featuring Riley's journey and speak to the students about empathy and kindness. The school agreed enthusiastically, and Ethan spent the next week putting the presentation together. He combed through photos and videos of Riley, selecting moments that highlighted his resilience and joy. With Grace's help, he recorded a heartfelt narration that tied the visuals together. On the day of the presentation, Ethan stood in front of a room full of eager children. As he played the video, the room fell silent, the students captivated by Riley's story. When the video ended, hands shot up, and the children bombarded Ethan with questions. How did Riley learn to walk with his cart? What can we do to help animals like him? Can we visit the shelter to meet more dogs? Ethan smiled, his heart swelling with hope. The children's curiosity and enthusiasm reassured him that the message was resonating, even without Riley physically present. As the session ended, a teacher approached Ethan with tears in her eyes. "I've been teaching for over 20 years, she said, "and I've never seen my students so engaged. Thank you for showing them the power of compassion." Energized by the success of the presentation, Ethan shared the experience with his parents and Robert. "I think this might be the way forward," he said. "Riley doesn't have to be there in person to make an impact. His story is strong enough to stand on its own." As Ethan began transitioning their advocacy work, he noticed a change in Riley as well. With fewer public appearances, Riley seemed more relaxed, his playful energy returning. They resumed their favorite routines, morning walks through the park, lazy afternoons on the porch, and evenings cuddled on the couch. Riley's happiness reaffirmed that Ethan had made the right decision. But just as life began to settle into a comfortable rhythm, a new challenge emerged. One evening, as Ethan scrolled through his email, he noticed a message from a reporter at a major news network. The subject line read, "National Feature Opportunity, Riley's Journey." The reporter praised Ethan's work and invited him and Riley to appear on a televised segment about inspiring animal stories. It was a chance to reach millions. But it would also mean traveling and putting Riley back in a high-stress environment. Ethan sat with the email for hours, weighing the pros and cons. He discussed it with Grace and Mark, who offered their support but left the decision to him. "You know Riley better than anyone," Grace said. "Whatever you decide, and we'll stand by you." That night, Ethan lay awake. Riley snuggled against his side. He thought about all they had accomplished together, the lives they had touched, and the journey they still had ahead. Finally, he made up his mind. The next morning, Ethan drafted his response to the reporter, a polite decline. He explained that while he was honored by the opportunity, Riley's well-being came first. Instead, he offered to collaborate on a written feature or a video segment that could showcase Riley's story without requiring him to travel. As he hit send, Ethan felt a wave of peace. He had found his balance, honoring Riley's story while protecting the bond they shared. Ethan's decision to decline the television feature marked a turning point in his journey with Riley. It was a clear declaration that their advocacy work would always prioritize Riley's happiness and well-being over external recognition. But as news of Ethan's decision spread within the local community and among their supporters, reactions were mixed. Some applauded Ethan for putting Riley first, while others criticized the missed opportunity, claiming it was a mistake to turn down such a large platform. The criticism stung more than Ethan expected, especially from a few animal advocacy groups he had admired for years. One afternoon, while scrolling through social media, Ethan came across a post from a prominent activist who wrote, "If we don't use every platform available to us, we risk losing momentum for the cause. Personal feelings shouldn't outweigh the greater good." Ethan's chest tightened as he read the comments below the post. Some agreed, directly referencing Ethan's decision, while others defended him, arguing that compassion should extend to all beings, including Riley. "I didn't expect this kind of backlash," Ethan admitted to his mom that evening. "I thought I was doing the right thing, but now I'm not so sure." Grace set down her knitting and looked at Ethan with a steady gaze. "Ethan, you've done more for the cause than most people ever will. The fact that you care so much about Riley's comfort shows what kind of person you are. Don't let others make you question that." Ethan nodded, but the doubt lingered. Determined to regain clarity, he reached out to Robert for advice. Over coffee at the shelter, Ethan shared his worries about the backlash. "Ethan," Robert began, leaning back in his chair, "there will always be critics, no matter what you do. But let me ask you this. When you look at Riley, do you see a happy dog?" Ethan nodded without hesitation. "Of course. He's thriving now." "Then you've made the right choice," Robert said firmly. "This isn't about winning the approval of everyone out there. It's about staying true to your values and the bond you share with Riley. That's what inspires people, not fame or recognition." Ethan left the shelter with a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that staying true to his principles was more important than pleasing everyone. Still, he wanted to ensure their advocacy efforts remained impactful, even without Riley's physical presence. Over the following weeks, Ethan threw himself into his new approach. He partnered with local shelters to create workshops on compassionate pet care, using Riley's story as a case study. He collaborated with Grace to design an illustrated children's book about Riley's journey, teaching empathy and kindness through engaging storytelling. To reach even more people, Ethan began a podcast sharing not only Riley's experiences, but also interviews with other pet owners, trainers, and shelter volunteers. As these projects took shape, Ethan noticed a shift in how people responded. Messages poured in from families who had adopted disabled pets, inspired by Riley's story. Teachers wrote to thank him for the educational materials he had provided, and other advocates reached out to collaborate on similar initiatives in their communities. Despite these successes, a part of Ethan still worried about how Riley might feel about the changes. One evening, after a particularly productive day working on the children's book, Ethan sat beside Riley on the couch, stroking his soft fur. "How do you miss it, buddy?" he asked softly. "The crowds, the events, being the center of attention?" Riley looked up at him with bright, trusting eyes and let out a soft, contented sigh. He rested his head on Ethan's lap, wagging his tail gently. Ethan chuckled, the gesture filling him with reassurance. "You're right," Ethan said with a smile. "This is where we belong." But just as Ethan found peace in their new direction, an unexpected letter arrived. It was from the producer of the TV show Ethan had declined. In the letter, the producer expressed disappointment, but also admiration for Ethan's decision. She explained that she wanted to feature Riley's story anyway, through a beautifully produced segment that would incorporate the photos and videos Ethan had already shared. "It'll be your story, your way," the letter concluded. Ethan stared at the letter, his heart pounding. This was exactly what he had hoped for, a way to share Riley's journey without compromising his comfort. He called the producer immediately, thanking her for her understanding and agreeing to collaborate on the segment. A month later, the feature aired nationwide. It was a stunning piece, blending Riley's past struggles with his present joy, showcasing his bond with Ethan, and inspiring viewers to consider adopting disabled pets. The response was overwhelming. Donations to local shelters spiked, and adoption inquiries poured in. More importantly, Ethan received countless messages from people who felt moved to make a difference, proving that their story had achieved its intended impact. That evening, Ethan sat with his family, Riley curled up at his feet. "We did it, buddy," he whispered, his voice full of gratitude. "And we didn't have to sacrifice anything to make it happen." Riley thumped his tail in response, as if he understood every word. The night the feature aired, Ethan couldn't sleep. As the final credits rolled on the television screen, he felt a mix of relief, pride, and anxiety. Riley lay beside him on the couch, his breathing slow and rhythmic, utterly unbothered by the whirlwind their story had created. The messages began pouring in almost immediately. Ethan's email inbox filled with heartfelt letters, each one more moving than the last. Families shared stories of adopting disabled pets after watching the feature. A mother wrote about how her son, who had been afraid of dogs, felt inspired by Riley's courage and wanted to volunteer at their local shelter. One letter, in particular, brought Ethan to tears. It came from a man named Henry, who had recently lost his elderly dog, Max. He wrote, "I wasn't ready to open my heart again, but watching Riley reminded me that every dog, no matter their circumstances, deserves a chance at love. Tomorrow, I'm heading to the shelter to find my next best friend. Thank you for reminding me what's important." Ethan read the email aloud to his mom, who had stayed up with him to celebrate the moment. Grace wiped a tear from her cheek and said, "This is why you did it, Ethan. Look at the lives Riley is already changing." But it wasn't just the messages that confirmed they'd made the right decision. The very next morning, Ethan received a call from Robert at the shelter. He sounded almost breathless with excitement. "You won't believe this, Ethan," Robert said. "Since the feature aired, we've had more adoptions in the past 12 hours than we've had all month. People are coming in asking for dogs like Riley, dogs who might not have had a chance otherwise." Ethan felt his chest tighten with emotion. "That's incredible, Robert. Riley's story. It's really making a difference." "It's more than that," Robert continued. "You've started something bigger than us. People are talking about what it means to truly give animals a chance, and that conversation is reaching far beyond our shelter." Later that day, Ethan and Riley visited the shelter. When they arrived, the once quiet space buzzed with activity. Families filled the lobby, signing papers, meeting dogs, and sharing smiles. Ethan saw a little girl hugging a three-legged Labrador and an elderly couple adopting a blind spaniel. His heart swelled at the sight. "See what you did," Robert said, clapping Ethan on the back. "This is because of you and Riley." Ethan looked down at Riley, who wagged his tail as if sensing the joy around him. "This is because of all of us," Ethan replied. "Riley's just the spark. We're all the fire." As they walked through the shelter, something extraordinary happened. A boy, no older than 8, ran up to Ethan, clutching a small sketchbook. His parents followed closely behind, smiling apologetically. "Are you the man with Riley?" the boy asked, his wide eyes filled with awe. Ethan crouched to the boy's level. "I am, and this is Riley," he said, gesturing to the dog at his side. The boy beamed and held out his sketchbook. Inside were hand-drawn pictures of Riley, complete with his wheelchair and his bright, eager expression. "I saw him on TV," the boy explained. "He's my hero. I want to adopt a dog like Riley someday." Ethan's throat tightened as he looked at the boy's proud face. "These are amazing," he said, flipping through the pages. "You're a talented artist." The boy's mother smiled and added, "He's been drawing Riley non-stop since last night. He says he wants to grow up and help dogs who need homes. Ethan glanced at Riley, who seemed to be enjoying the attention. Well, Ethan said, Riley and I think you're going to do amazing things. The boy knelt to pet Riley gently, and for a moment, the world felt beautifully still. Ethan realized that Riley's story had touched more lives than he'd ever imagined, sparking a movement of compassion that stretched far beyond their small town. That evening, back at home, Ethan sat in the quiet of his living room with Riley curled up beside him. He thought about the journey they'd been on, the struggles, the doubts, and the ultimate triumphs. It hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every moment. Grace entered the room, holding a mug of tea. She sat beside Ethan, her expression soft. "I've been thinking about what you've done," she said. "You didn't just change Riley's life, Ethan. You changed your own. And you've changed so many others along the way." Ethan nodded, looking down at Riley. "I never thought this would become something so big. It all started because I couldn't stand the thought of him being overlooked." Grace smiled, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness have the biggest ripples." As Riley snuggled closer, Ethan felt a deep sense of peace. He knew their journey wasn't over. There were more stories to share, more lives to touch. But for now, he was content. Riley was happy. Their mission was thriving. And together, they had created something truly extraordinary. The weeks that followed cemented Riley's story as more than just a moment. It became a movement. Across the country, animal shelters reported spikes in inquiries about disabled pets. Families were stepping forward to adopt animals they might have overlooked before. Social media buzzed with posts featuring pets with unique needs, each story more heartwarming than the last. Ethan found himself unexpectedly in the spotlight. News outlets reached out to feature him and Riley, but he always redirected the attention to the message, "This isn't about me. It's about giving every animal a chance to be loved." Grace, always Ethan's biggest supporter, marveled at how much her son had grown through the experience. "You've found your purpose, Ethan," she said one evening as they sat on the porch. Riley dozed contentedly at their feet, his wheelchair glinting in the soft light of the setting sun. "I think I have, Mom," Ethan replied, his voice thoughtful. "It's not just about Riley anymore. It's about showing people that love isn't about perfection, it's about connection." Together, they brainstormed ways to keep the momentum going. Ethan launched a small campaign called Second Chances, dedicated to raising awareness and providing resources for shelters to care for animals with disabilities. With Riley as the mascot, the campaign took off, attracting support from individuals and organizations alike. But the most meaningful moments came from the everyday encounters. Ethan often received letters and photos from families who had been inspired to adopt animals like Riley. Each one reaffirmed the impact of their journey. One day, as Ethan and Riley returned from a walk, a familiar face appeared at the door, the little boy from the shelter with the sketchbook. This time, he was holding the leash of a shy, three-legged puppy with big, curious eyes. "This is Max," the boy said proudly. "We adopted him yesterday. I thought Riley might want to meet him." Ethan crouched to greet Max, his heart swelling with pride and gratitude. Riley sniffed the puppy cautiously before wagging his tail in approval. It was a moment that encapsulated everything Ethan had hoped to achieve, a ripple effect of love and second chances. As the sun set on another day, Ethan sat with Riley in the yard, reflecting on how far they'd come. The once-forgotten dog, overlooked because of his differences, had become a symbol of resilience and hope. And in loving Riley, Ethan had found a deeper understanding of compassion and purpose. "Ready for another adventure, buddy?" Ethan asked, scratching Riley behind the ears. The dog looked up at him. His eyes bright with trust and affection, Ethan smiled. "Me too. If Riley's story touched your heart, imagine how many other animals are waiting for someone to see their worth. Whether you're ready to adopt, volunteer, or simply spread the word, every small action makes a big difference. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and check out this heartwarming video next. Let's keep the ripple of compassion growing, one story at a time. See you in the next adventure.